They're poke berries from that poke plant right there. They're poison. You can't eat them even though they look delicious. But people used to use them way back when for pigments and dyes. You could write with them, dye a real pretty bluish violet color. It was, a couple years ago. I had just turned 18. It was my birthday, as a matter of fact. And I was out driving around town with my buddy Ray. We'd been drinking a couple beers and we were heading over to the tracks to drink a couple more to celebrate good times, everything. I was stopped at a stop sign somewhere on Donaghy, and a pretty girl walked by with her old man. So I hollered at her and winked and, just making a fool out of myself. And I was laughing with Ray about it. I turned around and looked, and the man was standing at my window yelling something terrible. I don't know what his problem was, but he punched me in the chest. And before I could think, he had zipped on and he was gone. I was kind of stunned by the whole thing. And then Ray said, "Geoff, your chest is bleeding." So I looked and it was gushing like nothing you ever seen before. The man had stabbed me right in the heart. I said, "Ray, you got to get me to the hospital." So he drove me. It was right there on Donaghy too. So I got in and they took care of me. It all turned out all right. Lucky. The little sac that contains the heart, that little membrane, filled up with blood and became like a pressure bandage, and it kept me from bleeding out and dying. I was damn lucky that day. It makes me think about winking at pretty girls every now and again. There's an Indian chief in central Oklahoma. One day, a man from his tribe comes up and asks him, is it going to be a cold winter or is it going to be mild? You never can really tell in that part of the country. And he hadn't been taught the old ways, and he didn't know by just looking at the trees or watching how the animals acted how it was going to be. So he figures, be on the safe side, tell him it's going to be cold. Tells him to start gathering firewood. Then the next day, he calls the National Weather Service and asks them, is it going to be a cold winter or a mild winter? And they say, well, we think it's going to be pretty cold. So he calls a powwow the next day. Says, everyone gather up your firewood. So they go to gathering, and he calls up the Weather Service the next day and asks them, is it still going to be as cold as you say? And they say it's going to be one of the coldest winters that they've ever seen. So he calls another powwow, says, gather every scrap of firewood that you can find. So they commence the gathering, and he calls the Weather Service the next day. Says, is it still going to be as bad as you say it is? And they say it's going to be a blizzard, the worst, second ice age. They say, how do you know? And they say, well, it must be, because all the Indians are gathering firewood like crazy. I'm going to have to go get that thing again.